we were created with a creative genius. I think that's one of the biggest ones that's a void in people's life right now, is so many people don't see themselves as being a creative person, as being someone who has something unique and special. And for me, what I've discovered, especially in coaching and just talking with all the people I've talked to over the years, is a lot of times it's because that particular creative genius in them, it comes so natural to them that they don't even think it's a thing.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, DomBrightmon. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by the GoingNorthPodcast.com shop. It is going to help you have northbound direction to your own success. If you want a great inspirational quote like advance others to advance yourself, or today a reader, tomorrow a leader, heck, even some puns like pile on and always fully booked on your tote bag, mug, hoodie, heck, even a t-shirt, and many, many other items, head over to GoingNorthPodcast.com, click on the shop tab, and cop yourself some merchandise indeed. And that's GoingNorthPodcast.com/shop. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as GMP, the great, glorious, and glamorous, is the Going North Podcast. We got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of Podmatch.com, the wonderful site where podcast guests get to connect with podcast hosts. And if they're cool, they're freaking in. Today's guest is cooler than 20 cucumbers indeed. That's right indeed, because we got a man of the cloth in the building, baby. That's right indeed. My man is not only a wonderful author, he's a husband, a father, minister, award-winning leadership coach, and keynote speaker. So let's give it up for the C to the H, the champion himself, the man who is full of humility, the one and only Clint Hatton. How you doing today, Clint?
Hey, Dom, how you doing, man? It's good to be with you.
Yes, sir, indeed. Sir, indeed. It's like a valley, but we finally made it.
Yeah, that's right. And with that introduction, man, I feel like I should have some boxing trunks on and punch something. I don't know what, but you know, I'm ready to duke it out with something.
I guess maybe duke it out with North Carolina.
Right. It's gonna be good.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be good with all the O's indeed. And the good news is, no matter how good introductions are, they only cover, I don't know, maybe so much out of 79.5 thousand years of content, and you haven't even been alive that
Right.
long. So my goodness, by filling in any cavities I may have missed about you since your first time here on Going North, my man.
Man, I don't know. I think you hit it. I mean, I feel tired the way you described that. I'm gonna need a break. But no, man, things are awesome. I love my life. I love all the things that I'm putting my hands to, and appreciate this time with you. And so let's have some fun, and we'll dig into some stuff, and let's help some people today, man.
Indeed, that's what I'm talking about indeed. So my goodness, so since a man has been a pastor for 17 years, always got to ask pastors about leadership. So what would you consider your 3 major leadership lessons for being a pastor for over 17 years, oh man?
3 leadership lessons. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think number one is always, and this is one thing I think you hear a lot of leaders say, but everyone's a leader, right? Everyone is a leader. At the very least, we're leading ourselves. So I think being a great leader first starts with leading yourself, and when we're talking about, someone of faith, that's obviously in our relationship with God. So, I think that's always number one. You can learn a lot of leadership principles, and you can say a lot of things and come off a certain way that make you look like a leader. But at the end of the day, if you're not leading yourself well, something's going to implode eventually. So that's number one. Number two, I think, one of the things that I subscribe to, some people describe it as a servant leadership model, is my job as a leader isn't to try and impress people to get them to follow me. It's really to, find the gold in them, to dig out the leadership in them. And so that's number two for me, is always looking for the gold in people. Super easy to criticize, right? Super easy to find flaws and in areas where people lack, but it takes a great leader to find that gold in people and then help just excavate that and help them become the best that they can be. And then I think a great leader also is going to have some persistence, right? You're going to have to be willing to be in it for the long haul, because not everything goes your way as a leader, right? There's adversity, there's things that happen. And so you need to be able to be someone who's persistent, who is resilient, and is willing to, take the ball to the house, man. You gotta you gotta keep running plays until you take the ball to the house, right?
So powerful indeed. Definitely got to take it to the house, indeed. That's right, indeed. Take it to the house, indeed. And heck, that funny enough happens with the second one that you mentioned. Hey, look for the gold in others and digging for
Yeah,
that gold because everybody's got it. Because
they
everybody
do.
sometimes folks just think it's missing indeed. And I guess that's probably one of the major reasons why you're in the coaching business now, because a lot of folks don't see the gold that they already got within themselves.
No, I think that's really true. One of the things that I have on my site, I actually stumbled onto this phrase, Dom. It was funny. It wasn't something that I actually had made up or, talked to some marketing guy and came up with these three things. I was actually in a conversation with a guy, and just like you just did, he asked me for three things, which is hilarious because my wife is always getting on me because I always put everything in three. I always say, well, there's always threes in my life. I always say there's three things, there's 3 points, there's three this, three that. But I was talking to him and he asked me a question about people. And I said, well, I believe three things about every human being on the planet. And man, it just stuck. And that's this: I believe they're created to be courageous. And what I mean by that is I believe courage is in you. It's already in you. I believe I can prove that biblically, and I can prove that even scientifically. But there's a courage waiting to come out of every human. But the second one is we were created with a creative genius. Third, I'll just say it just to get the threes in, is we were created to be compassionate. But that second one, creative genius, to your point, I think that's one of the biggest ones that's a void in people's life right now, is so many people don't see themselves as being a creative person, as being someone who has something unique and special. And for me, what I've discovered, especially in coaching and just talking with all the people I've talked to over the years, is a lot of times it's because that particular creative genius in them, it comes so natural to them that they don't even think it's a thing. And so, to your point, they don't see themselves as doing anything special or being anything great. And the reality is they are great and they're amazing. They just need maybe someone else to help them see it.
Amen to that because it's so darn true. Because that's kind of like the good and bad part about it. Because it's like it comes so natural. It's like, oh yeah, they could do with these. Only problem is like, oh yeah, doesn't everybody do this? It's like, no, not
Right.
everybody does it the way you do, buddy.
No, man, that's exactly right. And plus, we get punched in the mouth too, right? We get things happen, things cause us to kind of lose sight of some of those things. You know what? You just made me think of something. If you don't mind me sharing, there was a NASA study done. This is partly why I believe I can prove, once again, biblically and scientifically, that God did put a creative nature in us and we are a creative genius. What happened was is NASA hired these two scientists and they wanted them to create this test that would measure the creative genius of their rocket scientist for a very simple reason, just simply so they could assign the most challenging projects and concepts to those guys, right? Or to those ladies. So they bring these guys in, they develop this test. And I should point out too, when we start talking about creative genius, we're not talking about, your ability to play piano or, paint a picture or sing. Usually when we think of creativity, we automatically go to something like that, some form of art, right? But creative nature is way beyond that. It's your ability to problem solve, think outside of the box, think of even solutions that other people can't think of. So creativity is very broad. So they did this test. This is going to blow your mind, Dom. What ended up happening was it ended up becoming very effective. And so NASA was very pleased with it. Well, the two scientists, after they were done working with NASA, decided, let's see what we can find out about how this applies to a much broader group. So here's what they did. They brought in 1,600. Well, they didn't bring them in. They went and found. Yeah, there would have been a lot of kids, but they tested 1,600 4 and 5-year-olds. Okay, you with me so far? Now this exam, this test they created, they discovered was actually very simple to implement. So they knew they could give it to anybody and get accurate results. So these 4 and 5-year-olds took this test, and out of the 1,600, guess how many tested as a creative genius? Just throw out any kind of a number. What do you think?
10.
That's what you might think, huh? That's exactly right. You would think it's probably going to be a low number. 98%.
Oh,
I'm going to let that sink in for a second. 4 and 5-year-olds, 98% tested as a creative genius. So then they were so blown away. 5 years later, they run these same 1,600 through another test. Now it drops down to, and I may have my number off by 1% or 2, but it was somewhere around 36%. Ultimately,
wow.
5 years later, around high school-ish, drops to 12. And then they test them one more time, and by now they're in a range of ages around 25 to 31, right? Young adult age. And the number dropped to 2%, that same 1,600. So what does that tell you? Well, to me, one, that tells you that you have creative genius in you from the get-go. He put it in there. God put it in there. But things happen, right? And there's a lot of things you could potentially point to, right? I mean, you could point to early childhood trauma, the way you're raised, perhaps, your parents, whether they encouraged your creativity or your particular, type of genius, or they didn't. The school system is certainly partly responsible for that, because our school system, and I'm not trying to knock. I have a lot of friends that are teachers, by the way, so don't send me any nasty text messages or emails. I am not knocking those of you who pour your life into educating our kids, but generally speaking, the public system itself is not designed for the success of every type of student. That's just a fact. And so there are many types of creative genius that just don't do well with the way we do school. And so those are some of the things that you can look at. But Dom, it's in there, man. It's in there. It's in you. And here's the last piece, and we can jump out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What was really cool is I discovered that one of the scientists decided to keep doing this because the results were so fascinating. Now he's done actually over 1 million people, and those numbers hold out. But what he described, now this guy, I don't think he's a believer. So, I'm not giving you guys a study that was done by a bunch of, pastors and, and Christians. He probably attributes this to something else. But what he did say was that what's interesting to him, and let me see what you think about this, that he said there's something that was created in our brain, though, so that we would never lose it. And it's divergent thinking. And divergent thinking is the type of thinking that you use when you dream in particular. Now, you can do creative exercises as well to kick into your divergent thinking. Journaling, for example, mind mapping. Those are great examples of how you can actually stir up your creative genius. But Dom, it's God put it in there. When you dream, you are activating that. So even though you may test a certain way with creative genius, God has put in a mechanism that runs in the background, whether you recognize it or not, that you cannot actually lose it. But you will have to learn how to tap back into it. Man, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, that's freaking huge. And especially that study itself, just really just grabbing a bunch of random 5-year-olds at the peak of their innocence. And it's like, oh yeah, they got a bunch of creative geniuses in here. And then it just dwindles down as the years go by, thanks to more time on the good old blue earth, among many other things that Earth has to offer, and how they had to develop resilience and all the other good stuff, all the way to the whole divergent thinking, where it's like, I feel like, you think that may be the subconscious mind, maybe?
Oh yeah, well, no question. Yeah, I'm kind of a neuroscience geek. I love what we're discovering about the brain. And so I'm not going to get into the weeds because I am not a neuroscientist. Let's be very clear about that. So, but what they have discovered that's pretty well accepted now is that 95% of the way our brain works is subconscious. Because there's a myth. Did you ever grow up hearing that, well, you only use 7 or 8% of your brain or 10% of your brain? We used to hear that a lot, and they've debunked that. We've discovered that through neuroscience and the way they can test that now, that your brain is operating at 100% all the time. But you're not necessarily conscious of everything. Is 95% is subconscious. So yeah, that's exactly right. You're actively acting out of subconscious programs, a lot like your computer, right? Your computer can run all kinds of stuff. Like right now, mine's got only a couple things going because I want to make sure we had some good speed, man. But we got some background programs running right now, right? We're not focused on that, but it's still running. And that's kind of how it works. So you're dead on, man. It's totally, a lot of it's subconscious. And that's what's really cool, is they're learning that you can actually engage in and tap into that and reprogram your brain to be able to subconsciously begin to think about things that actually create growth, create creativity, that move you forward, that even help you work through mental issues, emotional issues. The way God created your brain, it's a powerful thing.
Amen to that. That's what I'm talking about indeed. And it's so true. Like, hey, it's like the greatest computer on earth is the computer that created all the other computers, even the good old AI that's out there right now.
That's right. That's exactly right, man. Come on.
So my goodness, my goodness. So I guess with all this wonderful knowledge that you have to really inspire others over the years and counting, like my goodness, how's it helped you in your life too? Because you've actually decided to join the business of immortality with your book, my man.
Immortality. I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, writing a book was something I had thought about for a very long time. And this is not a risky statement. I am guessing right now, with people that are listening to you and I talk, there's probably a whole bunch of people out there that have had the same kind of thought or dream, right? But I just never executed it. I sat on it for, oh gosh, 20 years, actually, probably 20 years. But I think for me, ultimately, what happened was I really struggled with two things. One was I felt like, doesn't the world have enough books already? you know,
Nope.
and I'm an avid reader too. I don't know if you like reading a lot of books, but I do. What about you? Are you a big reader?
Oh yeah, I love reading.
Yeah. So, there was part of me that was like, okay, why do I need to write a book? Because there's already a gazillion books out there, right? So that was one. And then the second thing is, what do I really have to say? I mean, what is there that I can bring to this world that's actually unique? And not necessarily that nobody's ever talked about at all before, because that would be kind of tough to do, right? There's really nothing new under the sun. But, did I have a perspective that actually could change someone's life? And so, I fought that for years and years and years. But ultimately, what happened for me, and unfortunately, it was a really difficult blow in our life that inspired me to do it. But in short, my oldest son, I have three boys, been married over 20 years, and my oldest son, Gabriel, was pretty exceptional. He just was really, all my boys are really smart in their own way, and they're special in their own way. With him, at 8 years old, he decided he wanted to become a pilot, and he just locked into it. So, you know, not as common. Most of us take some years to kind of figure out what we really want to do, but there are exceptions. You hear about the doctor who's a brain surgeon. It's like, no, I knew when I was 3 years old, I want to operate on brains. And he was kind of like that. And so ultimately at 16 years old, he soloed before he actually even had a driver's license, through some cool opportunities that we had to allow him to start to fly. And then at 17, he got his private pilot's license, which was one of his first life goals. So really awesome. There was a lot of what we believe God's favor to get us to that point. So then he was training for several months, and about 3 months shy of his 18th birthday, he was just doing what new pilots do, which is you're just flying all the time, trying to get as many hours as you can. He flew a friend home to the University of Arkansas where they were attending school, which is just, I live in Dallas, it's a few hours north. And on his return trip, he ran into some unexpected weather and ultimately crashed into the side of a mountain and lost his life. And so, for us to say it was a devastating blow is an understatement. Pain's still very real. It's still been a little under 4 years, and in many ways it feels like yesterday. But to your question and to your point of eventually writing a book, what happened, Dom, was as I came out of the early stages of grieving, I call the first year the shock and awe stage. It's a really tough thing. And, your listeners who have been through something similar know what I'm talking about. And so it took some time, but eventually once I started getting past that, I really just looked at the way he lived life, and he was adventurous and he wasn't afraid to take risks. And if he put his mind to something, for example, he wanted to play guitar. So he taught himself guitar. He just started it was kind of a funny story. We're sitting in our living room one night, and all of a sudden, and for the life of me, I wish I could remember exactly which classic rock song it was, but we're just going to say we're going to say Stairway to Heaven just for the sake of conversation. But we're sitting in the living room. We hear this, and my wife looks at me and she goes, "That sounds live." I'm like, "It does sound live." So we go down the hallway because his room is like on the opposite side of the house. We open the door, and sure enough, he's sitting there. And I've been given an electric guitar, so we had one already, and he's playing this classic rock guitar riff, and I mean, he's playing it really well. We're like, "When did you learn guitar?" YouTube. YouTube, dude. Everything's YouTube now, right? I can learn how to do anything. So, he was just very adventurous and wasn't afraid to try things. And so, going back to my earlier point of why I had not written a book yet, which was really fear-based. I had all these excuses and all these reasons why, which ultimately boiled down to fear that what if I'm not enough? What if nobody wants to read it? What if it doesn't make a difference? And I began to think differently. And I thought, you know what? I have areas of my life where I've been courageous like he has, but I have pockets where I'm a coward. And I use that word. And I decided I didn't want to be a coward anymore. So for me, that was one of the huge catalysts behind me actually putting, we'll say pen to paper. It was actually fingers to keyboard, right? But then the second thing, Dom, was just simply this. This happened. He passed away in September of 2019. So all of us understand that 3 months later, that was when COVID hit. And so the entire world got rocked, right? And we all suffered in some form or fashion. In many cases, we lost loved ones and businesses, and the list goes on and on and on. And I really feel like when you look at what happened with the pandemic, and this is not a political statement at all for me, however you feel about how things were handled or not handled, and which side, that you fall on in terms of what we should or shouldn't have done, I haven't met really anybody that disagrees that fear was unleashed on our planet on a level that we've never seen before. And a lot of that has to do with technology, right? And media. And so those two things collided, wanting to be more courageous and do something that I had said for years that I would do. And then the fact that there was so much fear unleashed on this planet that I really felt at that point, God was telling me now's the time. Because this is like 2 years after he passed away, by the way. Now is the time to write this book. And so this book is, it's partly our story. I include some other people's stories as well. There's 4 other incredible human beings that I feature in my book, and their stories are going to inspire the fire out of you. They're just, I have a tagline. It's courageous, inspiring lives. I believe all of us need to live that way. It's great to be inspired by other people, but it's even better to be inspired by other people and then start to live a courageous life and become an inspiration, right? And so that's why I wrote it. I wanted people to learn how to overcome fear, to begin to be courageous, make courageous decisions. And so, that was enough to motivate me to eventually do it. And here we are, and I'm really happy I did. It's helping a lot of people.
Heck yeah, baby. That's right indeed. With that triple B swag, the big bold brave, you love to see it. That's right indeed. Hashtag coward no more. That's right indeed. That's right
Yeah,
indeed.
that's right. I love it. Come on, man.
Yeah, man, that's huge too. And that's like probably one of the major things that holds folks back is that fear and just heck, even I guess in a way comparison can fall into that gap too, because it's like, oh, there's so many books out there. Why the heck should the world need another book? It's like a lies. Like the world could use more books. It's not gonna hurt
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah, man. And here's why, your story matters. As you're
Mhm.
listening to our voice right now, as you're listening to Dom and I, your story matters. And so I am going to give, and I'm willing to talk as much as you want about, even how to write the book and all that kind of stuff. But I do want to point one thing out because I got some really great advice before I started writing the book. And that was, I talked to a gentleman that ended up writing my forward. And what he told me is he said, listen, because I told him I would commit to writing this book. He says, okay, here's what you need to do. I don't want you to write this like you're trying to write a bestseller and sell it to a whole bunch of people. I want you to write it like you're writing it to help one person. And so I want you to let that sink in about your story, because sometimes when we say something like, your story matters, because we live in this culture that glorifies people that are gazillionaires and famous and all that stuff. We automatically think, well, who am I? How can I, do this huge thing? Nobody ever said it had to be on that scale. But your story could radically change one person's life. Is that enough? Is that enough for you? And you have to answer that question. And for me, I decided that even if, and don't get me wrong, by the time you do all the work and months later, this thing finally gets published, you definitely want to sell more than one book. Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, I felt like if I could help one person, then I'm good with that.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Because at the end of the day, folks are going to be reading it one person at a time. It's not like everybody's going to gather around and try to read the one singular book. It's like imagine 20 people, sumo sized people try to read the one book. It's like it's not going to happen too easily.
That's
Unless
right.
it's on a
That's
big
exactly right.
screen.
That's
That's
exactly right.
right.
Doesn't work that way. That's right. And also, Dom, let's face it too, it may not be in a book form. You may just share your story with someone, just even in a conversation. But I'm really hoping those listening to us right now get that your story matters, and find a way to share it, find a way to cultivate it, where it's writing a book. Maybe you end up, we met through Podmatch. Maybe you join Podmatch and you end up just finding some people that you feel like you relate to, that have a shared mission, and then you just talk about your story. But man, share your story. It's powerful, it's unique, you're the only one who's lived it, and it matters.
That's right. It matters indeed. It matters indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, since you've been on a boatload of interviews promoting the good stuff that you're doing and really encouraging folks, like, my goodness, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're on the guest side of the game on the microphone, my man?
Man, it has to be three. First of all, Dom, I can't do one. It has to be three. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. To come up with just one, that is a challenge, man, because I feel like there's probably a few, but I think one would be, and this is going to sound maybe funny to some people, but how much did you struggle? And the reason why I say that is because I think a lot of times, like your listeners watch what you're doing. You do such an amazing job. You're getting incredible traction with your podcast. People love the show. You're good at what you do. And they often, we look at people who are flowing in there. We're going to go back to creative genius, right? This is your one version of your creative genius. They see you flowing in it and they just think it's always been that way and it's just easy, right? We look at people who a lot of times we term as overnight successes, right? And you find out like musicians in particular, a lot of times they'll finally get a song on the radio and they become this, big hit, and people go, oh man, I can't believe it. Like he became a superstar overnight. And the dude's like, I've been playing in bars in front of two people for 25 years. You know what I mean? And so I think that would be a question for me is just, did you struggle? What were some of the struggles and how did you get through that? Because I think that's the reality for all of us is we are going to have some struggles and we're going to have to learn to be resilient to do the things that God has called us to do.
Heck yeah, man. Because if I'm not mistaken, what was it? Two big setbacks, the one in high school and then another one, I guess, in college before you found Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. There's probably more if I was to just sit down and start writing out a list. But yeah, I had a couple of pretty big blows, like probably everybody listening today, one quickly was, I don't know how many of your listeners going to relate to this, but I felt like I had a pretty normal childhood up until I was about 12. We weren't rich or anything like that. It wasn't like, everything was perfect. I don't mean that by any stretch, but I grew up in Southern California. It was sunny. I got to play sports. Back in those days, you could let your kids out and, parents didn't even bother checking on you until it was dinner time or, sometimes even well after dark. So things were great. But then eventually what happened is when I was about 12, my dad ended up having an affair on my mom, and it led to some really ugly situations that the whole scene lasted about 2 years. They eventually reconciled and were married 65 years. And they both passed away actually 8 years ago, just a few months apart from each other. So we had a good relationship as an adult, but one of the blows that you alluded to was that situation. And so my mom ended up trying to commit suicide multiple times, almost killed me. A couple of those times, just because of the way she was doing it. One was in a car driving when she was drunk and I was in the passenger seat. We spun out at about 65 miles an hour on a little 2-lane road, and very, very lucky I didn't slam into a tree or something. And another time with a handgun. And so there was some scary situations. And then, even when things turned good, because, you alluded to when I came to know Jesus, and I started drug abuse and alcohol abuse shortly after that experience at 12, and really even did meth for 9 years, which that's a whole other story, right? I got involved in professional sales, which might surprise some people because when you think of 9-year meth abuse, you probably think of, some guy pushing a bike through a park, but that's what I think of, Dom. Where I grew up, meth use would have been a white dude that had 3 teeth, a bunch of tattoos, and pushing a bike through a park with his 3 belongings, something like that. That's what I would have seen. But there's a lot of professionals out there that get involved in heavy drug use. And that was, me. And so I did meth for like 9 years and finally made a courageous decision one day that I just didn't want that to be my lifestyle anymore. And so I quit cold turkey. And it wasn't long after that I actually got invited to a church and ended up being introduced to God and Jesus, and it changed my life. And that sent me on a totally different trajectory. But even with that, Dom, that doesn't mean that now your life turns perfect, right? And so we've had 2 babies that were premature. One was born 3 months early at 1 pound, 14 ounces. We had a miscarriage. So many people have suffered through that. So yeah, there's been other bumps in the road. There's been other things that have been setbacks. But at the end of the day, I think you have to just keep pushing on. And, I'll just quickly share. I want to hear your thoughts on this too. I really do. I'm going to share something with you, and I would love to hear what you think about it. One of the things that happened the morning after Gabriel's crash, that was my oldest son, is I had to tell my other 2 boys who were 9 and 14. And one of the things that happened that morning that kind of set us on course. And what I mean by that is I'm not talking about from a pain perspective. We still suffer the pain of his loss, and we will for the rest of our lives. You don't replace people. But I did know from being a pastor for so many years that if we didn't have the right kind of mindset about how we were going to live the rest of our life without him, it could destroy us. And so here's what we did. We sat on the couch and I said, we have 2 choices. We can choose to focus on his death. And if we do that, then we're going to be shadows of who we were created to be, or we can focus on his life and how he lived. And that's what we're going to do. And that's what we chose. And in looking back, there's no question that that was part of how we've been able to continue to move forward. You don't move on from losing a loved one. There's no such thing as moving on from a loved one. They're always going to be a part of your life, but you can move forward in your life. And so we have found ways of honoring him by the way we live ours, right? And so that's what we've chosen to do. And it's all about, that biblical concept that we've read about, choose life or death, right? And so we choose life. What are your thoughts on that? I can't even imagine the adversity that you've had to overcome. What does Dom do to overcome this stuff?
Hey, well, I do love the fact that you mentioned that powerful part of the story with you and your kids and your family like that. Because yeah, it's so true now, and especially nowadays where the way things have been going with sadly folks be thinking, oh yeah, it's probably the older folks when we pass away. It's like, oh no, it's the younger folks too, probably even more often
Yeah.
than the older folks. It's like, hey, like no one knows when their time card is going to get punched, and it may get punched early. And
Yeah.
to
You
say
never
just
know.
making that choice to focus on life like that, that's huge because it's so true. Heck, even that's one of the things my pastor likes to mention is that, hey, even though we're here honoring the dead, like during a funeral, it's like, hey, he still likes to share the gospel because our message is to the living. Because hey, we still got folks that are alive in here, and somebody can
Yeah.
get saved during a funeral.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
we had, we use the term, a lot of people do use this term, we didn't call ours a funeral, although that's a very appropriate way to say it, right? Of course, that's ultimately what it is, but we chose a celebration of life as the title for that particular event, if I could say it that way. And part of the reason why we did that is for the reason I just gave you. We decided that the way to honor his life is the way we live ours, and so that's what we chose to do. And so within that, was there painful moments? Oh man, absolutely there was. But we also had a lot of people telling some great stories. We laughed. We had joy remembering just some of the things that he did and who he was. And at the end of the day, my beautiful bride in particular, she had a fiery message for a lot of young people because he was pretty connected. He was really
Mm.
connected in our community. And we ended up with the church that we used to work for ended up just rushing in and being such a huge help to us with the venue and resources and even money that we needed to be able to pull that thing off. And so we held it at one of their campuses, and so we had like over 1,000 people show up for this thing, and many of those were teenagers. And that was the message, man, is that you can't allow death, because that's what they were feeling, right? They were feeling the sting of the death. And with that, if that's the only thing you focus on, then it can keep you trapped, as you said earlier. And the truth is, none of us know how long we have, but it can take away your hope and your excitement for your future. You can feel like it's just futile. What's the point, right? Why should I even try to accomplish anything? Because who knows? Maybe tomorrow, maybe today, I don't even know. And so she brought a message, man, and it was powerful. And still to this day, we run into people, or people, reach out to us through social media that were in that room, especially young people. And they were like, man, I've made a decision to allow my memory of him to inspire me instead of make me feel like, vanity, vanity, oh, what is life, and so some of them are already doing some great things. So that's the deal, Dom. You're dead on. We got to speak life in every circumstance.
Heck yeah, man, because that's huge. Like being able to get to 8 years old and then have that laser focus in a way, that Mamba mentality to realize, hey, this is what I want to be, and then actually fulfill it and do it and really follow through on it and then just get onto that trajectory of growth like that. Like, dude, that's freaking huge because a lot of folks don't have that focus and keep it for that long and really follow through with it. Like that's freaking huge. Like that wonderful, big, bold, brave mentality. That's right, indeed. The triple B mentality.
Yeah, man, come on. And I love that point, because there are people that do that, right? But a lot of us don't. A lot of us, it
Hmm.
takes time and years, and my encouragement with the Big Bold Brave is simply, it's never over. If you've got breath, it's not over yet. So even if you feel like you've wasted 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, man, as long as you got breath, you still have an open window to live your life big, bold, and brave and do something that makes a difference, man. And that's to me what it's all about. It's not just about doing something great, like some sort of an accomplishment that I can put a gold record on a wall, or I can, someone can see where the decimal point is on my bank account. That's all great. There's nothing wrong with any of that, right? There's nothing wrong with any of that, right? But at the end of the day, I think what's really significant is then how did I make people feel? How did I empower others? What did I do with my gift that made life better for someone else? And I think that's a huge, huge part of this, in my opinion.
Heck yeah, man, you're definitely right about that because it's so true indeed. So my goodness, it's all about having breath in your body and doing something big while you're alive, man. What you excited about over the next 24 months, my man? Well, that's 2 years. Well, now what the heck? Yeah, the next 12, 24 months. What excited about for the future, man?
Yeah, man. Well, for me, what I'm excited about is we've got a couple of things cooking. One is I'm actually no longer a titled pastor. We actually, in January of this year, we had started, I don't want to get in the weeds with this part of the story, but we had actually just started a very small, which was a house church at that time when Gabriel passed away, like had just launched out just a few months before. And so over the course of the last few years, as you can probably imagine, very difficult trying to figure out what's next. How do we handle this? So we actually ended up merging with another church with some pastors that we now serve that we just love them to death. We had the honor and privilege of being mentors to them. And so now we play a different kind of a role. We're like senior advisors to their leadership team, but in a volunteer role. We're not on staff anymore. And so for me, what I'm excited about this next year or two is I'm getting some opportunities now to dip my toes into both worlds, if I could say it that way. So I'm still speaking at churches. I have some powerful messages around this life and even the book and some of the principles that are in it. So I'm doing that, but I'm also doing some corporate gigs too, which I'm really excited about, Dom, because one of the things that can happen, and I don't mean this to sound negative at all. So please, as you're listening, this is not any kind of a criticism or a negative thing about being a pastor. But sometimes as a pastor, you do get so overwhelmed with your particular role inside the four walls and all the responsibilities that come with that really the only people you ever talk to are people who already share your faith. And I really, for many years, wanted to have some opportunities to break out of that, not to leave the church, and we haven't at all. We're very plugged into our church. But now I'm getting opportunities to share my story and to connect with others that don't share my faith and to help people begin to see new life perspectives that maybe they've never seen or heard before, or maybe they just never step into a church for a gazillion different reasons, right? But because we end up on a podcast or they bring me in to speak in a corporate engagement and we make a connection, and then, hey, can we talk afterwards? And then I get a chance to share a little bit more about who I am. So I've got a couple of pretty big ones. I can't say the names right now, but I've got a couple of very large global companies that one I've already sealed the deal on a talk with them. And the other one I just heard last night, actually, that it's looking like that's going to happen. So those are things I'm going to be doing over the next year. Yeah, come on. So excited about that. And then another thing that is going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months is what I haven't mentioned yet is, for us as a family, we're a family of, now four, obviously, as far as on this side of eternity. So my two other boys are now 18 and 14. We all have our own version of Big Bull Brave, what that looks like. I'm the author, I'm the speaker. That's not what they do. My wife became an artist and she does these paintings that would absolutely blow your mind. So she became immersed in that world. and she's very creative. Her creative genius is very clear. And she's a great speaker too, and amazing communicator, but she has a real gift in that area. And so one of the things that we're planning right now is we're going to be doing some events. She actually did one a couple of years ago and it was very successful, of bringing people into a setting where we are going to light them on fire with their particular form of creative genius, help dig that out, help excavate it, help empower them, help them even learn how to hear God better and how to bring him into whatever your creative genius is. So we're going to be doing some events that focus around that. I'm super excited about that. I really am, because we're getting a lot of people that are just super excited about the idea that they actually have a creative nature and that they could do something maybe that they've always dreamed of doing. So those are two that come to mind right now.
Woohoo! Sweet. Well, congrats on sealing the deal. Those two big corporate gigs, indeed. That's right. That's freaking huge. And hey, there's nothing wrong with getting out of the magical four walls. Like that's what John did. John Maxwell himself did, and he got a lot of flack
Right.
for it in the beginning. But hey, they they adore the heck out of him now because it's like, hey, such a major impact. And the thing was, a lot of folks in the corporate realms would read his books, and it's like, oh well, I guess they need some feeding. Let's go grab some corporate sheep and feed those sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on, man. That's exactly right.
Yes, indeed. So that means Clint Hatton leadership certification coming soon to you. That's right. That's right, indeed. That's right. Big, bold, and brave. Might have 10 more books out in the wings waiting to appear. That's right, indeed.
There are more coming. There are definitely more coming. Actually, to that point, let me say something real quick too to the people listening to us. When you make that courageous decision to step out in what your creative genius is, and let's say it is a book, I had no idea what was going to happen when I started to write it. I didn't know if I was going to hate it, right? I had no clue. And for me, I ended up loving it. And so I've already got a couple of different books kind of in the works that I had so many things coming to me that I had to push them off onto, different pieces of paper and just recognize that's another book. That's a different topic. I need to stay focused here. And that's what I believe could happen with you if you're willing to take a risk and step out into your creative genius, or maybe try something that you think you can't do, or that you've just never been willing to try before. And you never know, man, it may light a fire in you and it may end up becoming one of your greatest passions, and you'll find out you're awesome at it.
Yeah. So I'm talking about. That's the real deal Holyfield, baby. That's right, indeed. It's true. That's right, indeed. I get on fire. That's right, indeed. They might even throw gasoline on it, be like, ha ha, yeah, the fire is reaching overseas now, baby. That's right. That's right,
That's
indeed. From the
exactly right.
east, from Texas all the way to Australia, you love to see it.
Come on, man. That's exactly right.
So speaking of fire, that involves probably cooking food as a result. So if your magical book, Big Bold Brave, were a food, what would it be and why?
Ooh. That's a new question, dude. I've done a lot of these interviews. That's a new question. Wow. Okay. It'd be paella. People are like, either you know what that is or you don't, right? which it's a Spanish dish. And if you've never had it before, first of all, it's amazing. And it can be made a few different ways, but it's basically like this big casserole that's a lot of times you'll have multiple ingredients like chicken or seafood and different vegetables. And it's actually, if it's in like the original way to cook it was actually to dig a pit and put it in like a wok like thing and cook it in a pit. But it's an amazing dish. And the reason why I choose that is because I really believe that the book has something for everybody. One thing I like to point out is it's not a grieving book. If you're buying this book solely because you've heard that part of my story and you feel like, oh, I know someone who needs that because they're grieving or they've been through a hard loss, you're going to find it's way beyond that, because that's only just a part of our story, one part of our journey, right? So I think it's got a little bit of something tasty for everybody. So paella, I bet you nobody has answered paella.
Not that I could think of. No, I don't think anybody said paella. No, no, no. I can't think of anybody now. Who knows if the listener remembers and corrects me, super in, but hey, I think at first bat, my friend. That's right indeed with the paella. The big bold brave paella. That's right indeed. It got surf and tough.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's right indeed. It's surf and turf without the toe.
You're gonna have to Google it now, my friend. If you've never had it, you're gonna have to find a place that serves it. You're gonna love it.
That really is the goal because I've heard about it multiple times. I just never actually tasted it. So I have to actually find a place in the area that actually serves it.
Oh my
And
gosh,
hopefully
dude!
they
If
do a
it,
good job.
where are you? Where are you? I
I'm
forgot.
in Baltimore.
You're in Baltimore. Okay, very cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's got to be a great place somewhere nearby. You got to do it.
There we go. Just like the mountains. Gotta do it indeed. So, my goodness, coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that
Oh
is if
my,
it
here we go.
all. Oh, you'll be fine. So, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in 2023, what advice would you give to yourself?
At 25, yeah, find a couple of mentors immediately. When I was that age, I've, for whatever reason, just the way my life rolled, I felt like I had to do things on my own, and I had to make it happen. If I had to do it all over again, if I was 25, especially in today, I would find a couple of great mentors that could help take me where I want to go. And to that point, that means whatever it is you want to do in life, find a couple of people that are doing it well. Don't scroll Instagram or Facebook and answer a paid ad of some dude that's taking a picture in front of someone else's Ferrari or jumps in front of a plane that clearly isn't his. Go find a couple of people who have been there, did that, and ask them, hey, man, can you help me?
Oh, that's right, indeed. Solid advice, baby. That mentorship. That's right, indeed. Key to advancement right there. That's right, indeed. It's a gift. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Especially when we get one of those true blue, genuine mentors, indeed. Because, yeah, that fake it till you make it thing has gotten to a whole new level nowadays.
Oh my
Folks
gosh.
are tired
Yeah,
of it.
that is no doubt, man. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to. This is I'm gonna be careful here. I love working with young people. I think young people bring an energy and even their own source of wisdom and experiences. But I'm sorry if you're trying to follow some dude that's 22, 23, 24, 25 years old that's trying to tell you about the secrets of life. I'm sorry, there's some things that you just can't have wisdom in until you've lived a while, right? And that doesn't mean by any stretch that every person that's old has wisdom. Not at all. That is definitely not true. But find some people. And here's how you're going to know, Dom. Here's what I believe you're going to find when you know you found the right mentor, because I'll be 58 this year. When you find someone who's mutually fascinated with you, because I'm not talking about you're young and dumb. And so you just need to find someone older to tell you what to do. I'm talking about where there's a mutual relationship where you both learn from each other. But as a 25-year-old, you'll gain wisdom from someone who's lived some life without having to live that part of life, right? And maybe you'll escape some of the bumps and bruises along the way.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Because it's so true. Because, hey, if they're more interested in you and your growth than your wallet, then you found the right person indeed. Because
That's
folks will
it.
be like, hey, come on, buddy, lean on the pen. Well, I guess in this case, lean on the mouse with that little DocuSign app now where you don't have to sign an
All
actual
right.
paper.
No
It's like the
kidding.
line.
Yeah. Things are getting more virtual every day, right? I still like I'm a little old fashioned with certain things, and relationship is one.
Yeah, and I'm glad for that. We need to keep some of that on the freaking earth because this
Absolutely.
some of this new stuff is annoying, and that's coming from a dude. I'm a lot old as early
Come on.
30s. So for those need to keep up with what my man Clint the Champ is doing, what's the best way for folks to do so?
If you're an Instagrammer at Clint Hatton, so that's an easy one. And then if you're looking to find out more about my speaking and coaching and that kind of stuff, go to bigboldbrave.us. I like to say bigboldbrave.us because we don't do anything great without other people. So go there, find out all things Clint Hatton. I'd love to connect with you. Sign up for my free newsletter. I put out free content every single week on Friday, and just things that can help people move the needle, man. So love to connect with you.
Woohoo! Hashtag needle mover, baby. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Might even get tribal chief status, indeed, working with Clint. You never know. That's right, indeed. You get to be big, bold, and brave. The triple B goodness. That's right, indeed. So we're going to put a link to all that good stuff in the show notes. Make sure you cop some copies of his magical books and share it with your friends, family, cat, dog, penguin, heck, maybe even share it with somebody over a big, fat bowl of paella. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed.
That's exactly right. I'm going to start a movement. I'm going to start a paella movement now just because of this podcast interview.
Big, bold paella. Wait, don't you mean brave? No, paella. Paella is brave. It's brave.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, before the fishermen appear and try to catch us, even though we're not fish, any parting word before we close up shop?
Yeah, my parting shot would just simply be make a courageous decision to live your life to the fullest. You're the only one who can make that choice. That's it. I know that's simple. I know that you probably heard it before, but it really is that true. You're the only one that can make that decision. If you're not getting what you want out of life, that you're going to make a courageous decision and find a way to pursue it. Because none of us knows, like you said, Dom, you and I aren't promised beyond this call, right? Go do something great.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.